Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world heavy with incense smoke and the murmur of chanting, a place where the walls of ancient temples flicker under torchlight. You find yourself in the dense heart of Tenochtitlan, weaving through the chaos of the Tlatelolco market. The ground vibrates with the stomp of sandals, and you can't help but notice the stalls bulging with every imaginable good, piles of green chayote, baskets bursting with tamales, rows of fish gleaming in the hot sun. But you're not just a curious tourist tonight. You're an Aztec priest, and you have a very particular list in mind. You dodge around a merchant hawking cured rabbit meat, and a slight pang reminds you, no rabbit for you tonight. In fact, a lot of things are off limits, but we'll get to that. Historians still argue whether the Tlatelolco market was more chaotic or more orderly, because while Spanish accounts describe thousands of people bartering at once, some archaeological digs suggest carefully delineated zones, produce here, pottery there. All you know is that your senses are overwhelmed. Roasted maize perfumes the air, the tang of tomatoes mixed with smoke and a sharp tang of lime from women squeezing it over grilled insects. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and what time you're tuning in. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your stomach rumbles, and you tighten the cotton belt of your priestly robe, a reminder of modesty and duty. As a priest, you're expected to maintain not just a spiritual balance, but a bodily one. You don't gorge. You don't indulge. Or at least, not the way the market tempts you to. What you're really after tonight are the staples, things that fill you up but don't distract you from your rituals. Food, after all, is sacred. You glide past roasted turkey legs, their skins crackling in the afternoon sun, and steer toward the humble maize stalls. Now, here's the thing, the Aztecs didn't have rice or wheat. They had maize, and maize was everything. It was boiled, ground, steamed, fried. It was transformed into tortillas, tamales, atole, a warm, thick drink, and even used as currency in some cases. This wasn't just food, it was life. You've been taught since childhood that maize was a divine gift from the god Señal himself. You don't just eat it, you honor it with every bite. A fringe theory some historians throw around claims that the average Aztec ate up to 90% of their calories from maize-based foods, which, if you think about it, is like running your life on cornbread and porridge. And here you are, eyes resting on the golden piles of masa dough, wondering if you should get a tamale or two for later. You trade a few cacao beans for a neatly wrapped tamale filled with beans and squash, a common priestly meal. But as you walk away, a vendor calls out, waving a skewer of roasted grasshoppers. You hesitate, and here's why. Priests were supposed to set an example, to eat with humility, to reject the luxurious and tempting. But insects? They walk that fuzzy line between delicacy and necessity. After all, they're packed with protein, and protein is a rare and precious thing in your diet. Historians still bicker over whether high-ranking priests occasionally bent the rules during festival seasons, slipping fatty cuts of meat or honey-soaked treats into their otherwise sparse menus. Some claim the evidence is there, hidden in ritual offerings found at dig sites, jaguar bones, deer ribs, feasts clearly involving more than just maize and beans. But for now, you stay modest. You walk through the endless maze of market stalls, past merchants grinding cacao into thick, bitter paste, past women slapping tortillas between their palms in hypnotic rhythm. The sun dips lower, staining the temple stones with blood-red light. You clutch your simple meal, feeling the weight of it not just in your hand but in your soul. It's more than food, it's a symbol of who you are, of who you have to be. No extravagance, no distraction, just nourishment, plain and pure. Of course, you can't help but think about the rumors, the whispered tales that, during certain ceremonies, priests feasted not just on tamales and beans, but on something far more forbidden. You shake the thought away. Tonight, you'll stick to what's allowed, what's safe, what's sacred. Your sandals slap softly against the stone paths as you head toward the temple kitchens. Night is falling, and soon the real rituals will begin. You pass another stall, this one draped in fragrant herbs and burning copal incense, and pause to breathe it all in. Bitter, sharp, earthy. The smell of your world. The smell of the sacred. You take your first bite of tamale under the emerging stars. The masa is warm, dense, almost sweet. It's not just dinner, it's a prayer made edible. You sit on a low stone bench near the temple courtyard, unwrapping the tamale carefully. A thin mist rises from the masa as you peel back the layers of corn husk, and you can't help but sigh, quietly, reverently. Tonight's meal might be humble, but it carries the weight of the gods. You take another bite, and the familiar softness fills your mouth. It's comforting, grounding. Because if you're an Aztec priest, maize isn't just a crop. It's the beginning and end of everything you believe. Historians mostly agree that maize was the cornerstone of the Aztec diet, not just for commoners, but for the priestly class too. But there's still a debate lingering. Did priests enjoy more elaborate maize dishes, special varieties dyed red or black, or did they eat the same plain tamales as the masses? Some archaeological finds suggest the latter. No frills. No added luxuries. Just pure, unadorned maize. You glance up at the temple looming overhead, a geometric pyramid stacked like the layers of an offering cake, and you feel small, even in your sacred robes. Maize isn't just food here, it's a living link to the divine. You've chanted the myths before, how the gods bled themselves dry to bring the maize to life, how the sun itself was fed with human hearts and watered with the blood of warriors just to make sure the maize would grow. And you? You're fed with it too. Every bite you take is part of a cosmic cycle. Your mind drifts, because maize wasn't eaten only as tortillas or tamales. There were dozens of other preparations. Ever sipped a frothy cup of atole? Thick, almost pudding-like, flavored with cacao or vanilla when available. Or tried maize gruel left to ferment just slightly, a fringe delicacy some historians argue may have been the precursor to early ceremonial beers? You probably haven't, and honestly, you're not missing much. Still, as a priest, you're trained to appreciate the simplicity. To honor it. Even if your stomach sometimes growls for something more exciting. The trick is that maize is incredibly adaptable. Ground into fine flour on the metate, rolled and steamed into tamales, or left to dry into kernels for future atole or tortillas, it could carry a priest through days of fasting, give enough energy to stand through endless hours of ritual chanting, and still be light enough not to weigh you down during ceremonies. Of course, not all maize dishes are equal. Some are steamed with a sliver of squash blossom tucked inside, or wrapped around a dollop of black bean paste. Some tortillas are dusted lightly with salt, if you're feeling extravagant. Salt was a bit of a luxury, especially for priests in training. You can practically hear your old master's voice, whispering from the past, simple foods make a simple heart. A simple heart pleases the gods. But sometimes simplicity crosses the line into punishment. During ritual fasts, maize might be your only food, and not in its rich, tamale form either, just cold, hard tortillas, eaten dry, gulped down with plain water. Imagine days and days of that. The gods demand not just prayers and sacrifices, but sometimes your palate, too. There's an odd comfort in the repetition, though. The endless tortillas, the daily tamales, the atole sloshing in clay mugs, it's like the beating of a drum, a steady rhythm under the chaotic noise of life in Tenochtitlan. You lean back against the rough stone wall and close your eyes, imagining the fields of maize stretching out beyond the city walls, tall green stalks whispering in the wind, heavy with ears wrapped in silk. You can almost feel the sun on your face, the soil under your sandals. It's said that maize was so central to Aztec life that they had dozens of gods and goddesses tied to its cycle, Senyautl for the maize itself, Chicumcotl for the harvest, Xilanen for the young maize. A whole pantheon just for corn. It's almost funny, in a way. Your life, your prayers, your dinner, all wrapped up in those golden kernels. And here you are, a high priest of one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever seen, nibbling on a humble tamale, feeling the world spin slowly around you. The last bite is warm and grounding, and for a moment you feel almost full. Almost. You dust the crumbs off your fingers, careful not to waste even a morsel. The gods are watching, after all. Tomorrow will be another day of rituals and fasting, another test of endurance. But for tonight, you have maize. Sacred, simple, sustaining maize. And maybe, if you're lucky, a few beans to go with it. But that's a thought for later. For now, you gather your robe around you, tuck the empty husk into your pouch, and head toward the quiet hum of the temple kitchens. Because if you think maize is all the priests had, wait until you see what they paired it with. You shuffle closer to the low fire pits where temple cooks, young initiates mostly, work silently, heads bowed. The smell of roasted maize lingers, but now something else teases your nose, earthy, nutty, a little sour. Beans. Lots of beans. You settle onto a stone ledge, legs crossed, and accept a modest bowl handed to you. It's filled with a dark, thick mash of beans, flecked with crushed chilies and maybe, just maybe, a whisper of avocado leaf for flavor. You dip a tortilla in and take a bite. Warm. Hearty. A little smoky from the clay pot it was cooked in. Beans are your second lifeline after maize. Rich in protein, filling, and, let's be honest, pretty bland on their own. But you're not eating for pleasure. You're eating for sustenance. For devotion. For the gods. Historians agree beans were everywhere in the Aztec diet, often paired with maize to form a complete protein. Smart, really. It's like the universe engineered a plant-based diet before nutritionists could stick it on a blog. But what historians still argue about is whether priests, those at the apex of the religious ladder, got a little extra on the side, something richer, something more forbidden. You glance around the quiet courtyard. No roasted duck. No deer meat. No fish stew. Not for you. Even though the markets are full of such temptations, priests were expected to abstain from heavy, luxurious foods. Some sources claim high priests could sometimes indulge during festival times, but most days, you and your brotherhood dined like peasants. Maybe even stricter. And the biggest absence on your plate tonight? Meat! As a priest, you don't eat meat regularly, not even during grand ceremonies. This is partly ritual purity, partly practicality. Meat was expensive and rare. Hunting was laborious, and the lakes, though teeming with fish, didn't translate into daily feasts for you. You chew thoughtfully. The beans are thick and pasty but good in a way that only food eaten after long hours of standing and chanting can be. You remind yourself that this humble meal is a connection to the land, to the gods who crafted this world from bones and blood and starlight. Food isn't just fuel here, it's gratitude in edible form. Still, you can't help but imagine, what if meat were allowed? Roasted duck glazed with maguey syrup. Grilled fish stuffed with chili peppers. Fat, dripping cuts of venison. The Aztecs knew how to cook meat when they wanted to. Some modern scholars point to ritual ceremonies where offerings included freshly cooked meat. The debate lingers, did the priests partake? Or were those sacrifices purely for the gods and the emperor? You pop another bean-covered tortilla into your mouth and pretend you're not thinking about it too hard. Here's something else the records hint at, tucked away in the less glamorous chronicles: insects. Yep! High protein, crunchy, perfectly sustainable insects. Grasshoppers toasted over open flames, ant larvae folded into tortillas, even water bugs plucked from the lake and ground into paste. They're not meat, technically. They're somewhere between forbidden and encouraged, a weird, loophole protein source that the priesthood could probably slip into their diets without much guilt. You glance at the darkening sky, stars just starting to prick through the velvet dusk. Dinner is winding down, and you can already hear the low drone of conch shells calling priests back to evening rituals. You finish your beans, wipe your fingers clean on a bit of cloth, and rise slowly. Your stomach is not exactly full, but it's satisfied in a quiet, humble sort of way. Maybe that's the point. As you make your way back toward the temple steps, the scent of roasting chilies rides the night air. You smile a little, because you know what's coming next, and trust me, it's going to be hot. Beans were good, sure. But if you think the priests lived on bland food alone, just wait until you taste what they did to chilies. The night cools around you as you shuffle toward a smaller courtyard, the walls low and lined with reed mats. A cluster of priests gathers around simple clay griddles where small red chilies blister and pop over the fire. The smell is instantly overpowering, sharp, smoky, almost metallic. Your nose stings before you even get close. You settle among them, reaching for a small, dried chili set carefully on a cloth. It's tiny, shriveled, almost unassuming. You pop it into your mouth, and, bam, it feels like your tongue's been hit by a bolt of lightning wrapped in fire. Welcome to the Aztec Chili Challenge. Now, you might think you've had spicy food. You haven't. The chilies of Tenochtitlan, especially the Teppan and Pecan varieties, make modern hot sauces look like warm milk. Historians agree that the Aztecs revered chilies not just for their flavor but for their purifying properties. Eat enough chilies, and you're practically a clean slate, mind, body, and soul. Or at least, that's the theory. There's still debate, naturally. Some scholars argue that chilies were so integral to Aztec life that even priests ate them daily, not sparingly. Others suggest that the higher up you climbed in the religious ranks, the plainer your food became, with chilies being reserved for lower clergy or commoners. But you can tell from the sweat beading on your forehead that tonight, it's definitely on the menu. You fan your mouth with your hand, but it's no use. The heat blooms deeper, burns brighter. A few of your fellow priests snicker quietly, low, raspy chuckles that sound almost scandalous in the heavy, reverent air. There's a practical side to this heat, too. Chilies preserved food before refrigeration, warded off parasites, and, crucially for a priest like you, provided a jolt of energy during long fasting rituals. Think of it like ancient espresso, but instead of caffeine, it's pure, unfiltered pain. The Aztecs even weaponized chilies in other ways. Historians love telling the story of how ground chili powder was tossed into the faces of enemies during battle, a kind of prehistoric tear gas. Imagine being hit by a cloud of this stuff while also trying not to sneeze inside a sacred temple. You take another cautious bite of your tortilla, this one smeared with a dark, oily chili paste. It's got depth, smoky, earthy, with a lingering afterburn that feels almost spiritual. You can see why some believe chilies have protective, even magical properties. Eat enough of them, and you might just transcend your physical form out of sheer agony. There's a light joke passed around in Nahuatl, loosely translated. It goes, eat enough chili, and even the gods will weep for you. Judging by your watering eyes, you must be halfway to divine favor already. The night deepens, and the courtyard glows softly with firelight, casting shifting shadows on the walls. You can almost lose yourself in the rhythm of it, the hiss of roasting chilies, the soft murmur of prayers, the low chant of a distant flute. It's a strange comfort, knowing that the pain in your mouth is shared with every other priest here. A communal suffering. A ritual in its own right. Of course, not all chilies are created equal. There's the humble chiltepin, barely the size of a berry but capable of setting your soul alight. The smoky pasilla, the fiery habanero's ancient cousin, known to be so potent that priests supposedly used it to punish misbehaving novices. Imagine being 15 years old and assigned a bowl of habanero mash as a lesson in humility. Historians still argue whether such culinary punishments were widespread or just colorful exaggerations by Spanish chroniclers trying to spice up their tales, pun very much intended. Your fingers tingle slightly as you wipe them on a cloth. Chili oils are stubborn, and even the faintest residue can make your skin burn if you're not careful. But you've learned that already. You've learned it the hard way. The stars overhead are sharp and bright, as if the gods themselves are peeking down to watch you suffer and smile about it. The cool air against your flushed face is a relief, but you know better than to hope for mercy from the kitchen. There's more food coming. There's always more food coming. You stand slowly, feeling the chilly heat still bubbling under your skin. Around you, the priests begin gathering up bowls and cloths, snuffing the fires with careful handfuls of earth. You glance toward the next courtyard, where the smell shifts, earthy again, nutty, but different. Squash, you think. Seeds. Greens. You swallow and smile grimly. Beans and maize might fill your stomach, chilies might set your soul ablaze, but squash and sacred greens? They'll remind you that even in simplicity, there's depth, there's reverence. And besides, after the chili, anything will feel gentle. You drift toward the far end of the temple complex, where the scent in the air changes again. It's softer now, almost sweet. The fires here burn low, more embers than flame, and over them are cooking things far less flashy than chilies, squash, seeds, and greens. You take a seat on a flat stone near the hearth, stretching your legs carefully as a young acolyte offers you a simple clay bowl. Inside, a mix of stewed squash, amaranth leaves, and toasted pumpkin seeds, pepitas, glistens in the firelight. You stir it with a flat piece of tortilla, the way you've done 100 times before. It's humble, yes, but after the fiery assault of the chilies, this feels almost luxurious. The Aztecs revered squash almost as much as maize. Big, plump calabazas grew thick and twisting across the chinampas, the floating gardens that fed the city. Every part was used, the flesh in stews and tamales, the seeds roasted for snacks or ground into sauces, even the blossoms tucked into tortillas or eaten fresh in salads. And amaranth, Watley, was sacred. A leafy green loaded with nutrients, it was so important that it had its own goddess, Chickimpoatl, the Lady of Seven Snakes. Aztec priests used amaranth not just as food but in rituals, crafting small dough idols from amaranth flour and honey, then consuming them as part of ceremonies, a practice that scandalized Spanish priests when they arrived, who saw uncomfortable parallels to communion wafers. Historians still argue whether the amaranth idols were meant to symbolize the gods themselves or merely the power of maize and fertility. Either way, chewing your stew, you know that every spoonful ties you not just to the earth but to the sacred myths at the core of your world. You savor the rich, buttery squash, the crunch of toasted seeds. If maize and beans are the skeleton of your diet, then squash and greens are the flesh. Together, they form a complete body, a whole offering to your soul and your gods. There's a fringe theory whispered among a few scholars that amaranth was banned entirely after the Spanish conquest, not just because it was a powerful native crop but because it carried too much ritual meaning, too much defiant symbolism. You find yourself smiling at that. Imagine being so powerful that even your salad gets outlawed. The flavors are simple but layered, the nutty richness of the seeds, the slight bitterness of the greens, the soft sweetness of the squash. There's no salt, no pepper, no complex seasonings. Just fire, earth, and patience. And tonight, no meat either. While commoners might occasionally trap a rabbit or catch a duck, priests like you keep it vegetarian, at least on ordinary nights. Not out of a love for animals, this isn't a modern vegan diet, but out of respect for ritual purity and cosmic balance. Yet you can't help but remember the stories. The old priests who, after especially grueling ceremonies, were said to retreat to hidden rooms and enjoy feasts forbidden to lesser men. Meals of turkey and venison, roasted maguey worms dripping with fat, freshwater fish stewed in pumpkin seed sauce. Meals reserved not for sustenance, but for honor. Historians still debate whether those tales are exaggerations, the result of Spanish chroniclers' eager imaginations, or secret traditions lost to time. You lick a smear of squash from your thumb and think maybe it's better that way, some mysteries should stay mysteries. A soft night breeze picks up, tugging at the edges of your robe. The stars are thick now, scattered like spilled maize across the dark sky. You exhale slowly, feeling the heaviness of food settle in your belly. Not the groggy fullness of a glutton's banquet, but the steady, clean satisfaction of nourishment earned. A joke passes quietly around the hearth. A priest's feast is a rabbit's dream. Sparse, green, and endlessly repetitive. You chuckle under your breath. It's not wrong. Still, there's a comfort in it. A quiet dignity. You're not weighed down by greasy indulgence, not distracted by cravings. Your mind is clear, sharp, focused. And that's the point. You finish the last of your stew, wiping the bowl clean with a bit of tortilla. The hearth embers pulse and fade as the acolytes begin stacking the empty pots. You rise, joints creaking slightly, and stretch your arms to the sky. There's more to the night. More to taste. You catch the faint, familiar crunch of something small and crispy being toasted nearby. It's not squash. It's not seeds. Insects. You sigh. You knew this was coming. And yes, you're going to eat them. You don't even flinch anymore when the bowl is passed to you, small, clay, still warm from the fire. Inside it's a wriggling mass of something, crunchy. Grasshoppers. Chapulins, toasted to a crisp, their tiny legs curled in and their bodies gleaming faintly with a dusting of chili and lime. You pluck one between your fingers, examine it briefly, out of respect, not hesitation, and pop it into your mouth. Crunch. Sharp. Salty. A faint smokiness from the fire. And a surprising nuttiness that coats your tongue as you chew. If you're imagining this as some novelty, a desperate snack born of poverty, you'd be wrong. Insects were a staple, not a survival food. And for Aztec priests, they were a quiet loophole, protein without the blood, flesh without ritual impurity. Historians largely agree that insects formed an important part of the Aztec diet, but what they still bicker over is whether the priestly class indulged regularly or only during certain seasons when ritual fasting allowed it. Archaeological digs at temple sites have turned up heaps of grasshopper shells, ant larvae casings, and even tiny fish bones, evidence that priests might have been a bit more flexible with their diets than the strict rules let on. Tonight, you're flexible. You scoop a few more chapulins onto a fresh tortilla, folding it over neatly like a taco. You bite in, the crunch audible even over the low murmuring of the other priests. It's oddly satisfying. No one talks much. It's understood that meals, even modest ones like this, are part of your greater service. Eating humbly is its own prayer. Beyond grasshoppers, there's more. Next to the fire, another bowl holds ant larvae, Eskimos, delicate, almost buttery when cooked properly. These aren't just any ants, they're the elite, raised on the roots of maguey plants, harvested carefully by experienced gatherers. They're so highly prized, some scholars call them Aztec caviar. You scoop a few onto your tortilla. Soft, rich, almost sweet. Another reminder that in this world, delicacy doesn't always mean extravagance. Some nights, when the season is right, the lakes offer up another prize, water bugs. Massive, armored, gliding creatures that are caught, roasted, and ground into pastes or sauces. Tonight, there are none, wrong time of year, but you can still remember their distinct, musky flavor. Sharp, a little bitter, but filling. A fringe theory floats around among certain historians that insect farming was highly specialized in the Aztec world, with families or guilds dedicated solely to raising and harvesting specific species. You like the thought of that, a city within a city, teeming not just with humans but with carefully tended colonies of edible insects. You chew another mouthful thoughtfully, watching the embers crackle and spit tiny sparks into the air. Around you, the other priests eat slowly, methodically. No chatter. No feasting gluttony. Just the quiet communion of shared sustenance. And the truth is, insects fit your needs perfectly. They're abundant. They're renewable. They demand little and give much, kind of like what's expected of you. Plus, they store well when dried and spiced, offering a protein-packed snack that can last through long ritual fasts when larger foods are forbidden. There's even an old joke whispered among initiates: the gods gave us bugs so we'd never starve or sin. You smile faintly at that. It's not the worst motto. You finish the last bite, brush the crumbs from your robe, and hand the bowl back to the acolyte. Your stomach feels steady, not heavy, a crucial distinction. Too much food, and you risk sluggishness during the endless standing and chanting of ceremonies. Too little, and your mind wanders, distracted by hunger. You need balance. And as strange as it might sound, a meal of toasted grasshoppers and buttery ant larvae might just be the perfect middle path. The fires are doused now, smoke rising in lazy curls toward the star-pocked sky. You stand, feeling the cool stone under your bare feet, and stretch. The night isn't over. Not by a long shot. There's still one more taste waiting for you before the deeper rituals begin. You catch a familiar scent on the breeze, bitter, dark, rich. Chocolate. But not the sweet, creamy kind you're imagining. No, this is the Aztec priest's brew, bitter, thick, and sacred. And yes, you're going to drink it. You follow the scent like a moth to flame, weaving through the shadowed temple corridors until you reach a smaller, quieter courtyard. There, crouched low beside a hearth, a young priest stirs a clay pot with a wooden whisk. The sound is gentle, rhythmic, whup, 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 as the thick liquid froths and darkens under his careful hand. You know what's coming, and your mouth is already preparing itself. Cacao. But don't get ahead of yourself. This isn't the velvety, sweet chocolate bar tucked into a modern desk drawer. No. This is raw cacao, ground by hand, whipped into hot water until it foams, sometimes seasoned with chili, sometimes with vanilla or magnolia flowers, but never, ever with sugar. Sugar hasn't even arrived in this part of the world yet. The young priest ladles a portion into a plain clay cup and hands it to you with a nod. The vessel is warm against your palm, the surface of the liquid a restless, swirling froth. You bring it to your lips and sip cautiously. It's earthy, bitter, a little gritty, even. A far cry from the comforting sweetness chocolate will one day be known for. But in its own way, it's perfect, bold, grounding, energizing. The Aztecs didn't just drink cacao, they revered it. Cacao beans were so valuable they were used as currency. You could buy a turkey for about 200 cacao beans, or a tamale for just 1 or 2. Even as a priest, your stipends and offerings often came in the form of these precious little seeds. Historians agree on cacao's importance, but they still argue about who exactly got to drink it daily. Was it reserved for warriors and nobility, or did the priesthood enjoy it as well? Some evidence suggests that only high-ranking priests, those who had proven their spiritual purity, were allowed to partake regularly, especially during rituals that demanded alertness and endurance. You take another sip, letting the bitter liquid roll over your tongue. No sugar rush here. No creamy indulgence. This is cacao in its rawest, truest form. You can see why it was believed to grant vigor, wisdom, even spiritual insight. Some chroniclers claim that Montezuma himself drank dozens of cups of cacao a day, believing it to be a source of his legendary stamina. There's even a fringe theory floating among a few scholars that cacao was used in divination ceremonies. Sip the brew, close your eyes, and interpret the swirling patterns left behind in the froth. You smile into your cup. You've never seen anyone actually try it, but stranger things have happened. Tonight, the cacao is pure, whipped into a dense foam, probably with a bit of ground chilies stirred in for warmth. Maybe a sliver of vanilla bean, if the temple stores are feeling generous. No sweeteners, of course, just the raw taste of the earth, the sun, and the labor of 100 hands grinding and roasting and whisking. You glance at the others, heads bowed over their cups, sipping slowly, thoughtfully. Cacao isn't drunk for pleasure alone, it's drunk for strength, for wakefulness, for connection. It's easy to see why the Spanish, upon encountering cacao, immediately saw its potential, not just as a delicacy, but as a commodity worth its weight in gold. But here, tonight, in the quiet hum of the temple courtyard, it's something deeper. A sacrament. A lifeline. You tilt your cup, savoring the last sip. The dregs are thick, gritty, almost mud-like. You swirl them with a flick of your wrist, watching the patterns they make. No prophecy leaps out at you tonight, just the satisfaction of a belly not overly full, a mind sharpened, a spirit steadied. The night air is cooler now, nipping at the edges of your robe. You pass the cup back to the acolyte, who rinses it carefully in a basin of rainwater. Around you, the other priests move slowly, solemnly, preparing for the deeper rituals to come. You roll your shoulders, feeling the tension slide off. You're ready now, balanced, steady, and awake in the most ancient sense of the word. And just as you're settling into that state of calm readiness, the faint croak of frogs and the whisper of water catch your ear. You smile, because you know what that means. Next up, pond harvest. And yes, you're going to eat algae, and maybe a frog leg or two. You move through the temple's outer gardens, the stone underfoot slick with dew, until you reach the marshy edges where the chinampas kiss the water. The night is quiet here, save for the occasional croak of a frog or the distant flap of a waterbird. You squat low beside a canoe half submerged in the mud, where a shallow basket rests, heavy with the evening's harvest. You peer inside. The dark, tangled mass looks less like food and more like pond scum. Which, to be fair, is exactly what it is. Spirulina. Or as you and your fellow priests know it, Tecuhtitl, the stone excrement harvested from the shallow waters of the lakes around Tenochtitlan. It's algae, pure and simple, but algae with a punch. Dense with protein, minerals, and a sharp, slightly fishy tang that takes some getting used to. You scoop a handful into a small woven bowl, the green threads clinging together like wet hair. You plop it onto a tortilla, roll it neatly, and take a bite. It's gritty, briny, earthy in a way that makes your mouth feel like it's been dragged through a swamp, and yet somehow, not unpleasant. Definitely an acquired taste, but a crucial one. Historians mostly agree that Tecuhtitl was a major source of protein for the Aztecs, especially during fasting seasons when larger animals were off limits. What they still argue about is how often the priesthood relied on it. Was it a daily staple, a Lenten substitute, or a seasonal treat? Some suggest that high-ranking priests had special access to prime chinampa algae, harvested from sacred lagoons, while others propose that everyone, from peasants to priests, scooped their share whenever they could. You chase the algae taco with a gulp of cool water, suppressing a shiver. It's not glamorous. It's not even particularly filling. But it's packed with the nutrients you need to chant and stand for hours without collapse, and that's what matters. But it's not just algae on the menu tonight. You glance over to the other basket beside the canoe, where frogs, small, glistening, neatly skinned, are piled like damp jewels. Tiny legs folded in, bodies plump and ready for roasting. You reach for one, still cool from the lake's kiss, and skewer it carefully on a thin reed. The roasting fire is close by, just a low pile of embers now, perfect for a quick char. You hold the frog over the fire, turning it slowly, listening to the fat hiss and pop. The smell that rises is rich, savory, not unlike chicken but denser, gamier. You grin. Frogs were another of the Aztec world's culinary treasures. Easy to catch, abundant in the lakes and canals, and not quite meat in the same way deer or turkey were. They skirted the priestly dietary rules nicely, offering a sly indulgence that no one could really frown at. There's an open scholarly debate about whether frogs were seen as ritual food or just convenient protein. Some accounts hint that certain amphibians were linked to rain gods, like Tlaloc, and might have had sacred connotations, but no one can say for sure. Tonight, though, it's just dinner. You take a bite. The skin crackles under your teeth, the meat tender and slightly sweet. It's not much, 2 or 3 bites at most, but it's enough to remind you that food doesn't have to be grand to be satisfying. There's even a fringe tidbit that some frogs, depending on where they were caught, were thought to bring luck or fertility if eaten during certain moon phases. You're not sure if tonight's frog is particularly lucky, but you chew thoughtfully, eyes on the reflection of the half moon in the water. You finish the frog, tossing the tiny bones into the reeds. Beside you, another priest does the same, murmuring a quick blessing under his breath. You don't need words. The act itself is prayer enough. You sit back, stomach gently full now, algae, frogs, maize, beans, squash, chilies. It's a patchwork meal, stitched together from the earth, the water, the gods themselves. The night hums around you, a living thing. Crickets, frogs, the soft lap of water against the chinampa roots. And somewhere in the distance, the soft thud of fruit falling from a cactus. You smile, because you know what's next. It's time for dessert. Of a sort, prickly pears and guavas, fruits of the gods. You rise slowly from the reeds, brushing the dust and damp from your robe, and follow the faint scent of ripening fruit through the temple's orchard. It's not a grand space, just a modest grove tucked behind the main shrine, but it hums with life. Pale moonlight filters through the canopy, silvering the edges of broad guava leaves and casting long shadows across the packed earth. Your feet move instinctively toward the nopal cactus patch first. Broad, flat petals bristle under the weight of prickly pears, tunas, their skins glowing faintly pink in the moonlight. You pluck one carefully, rolling it in your hands to scrape off the fine, hair-like spines. Even a priest isn't immune to a cactus's bite. You sink your teeth into the soft flesh, and the fruit yields immediately, releasing a flood of sweet, tangy juice. Seeds crunch between your teeth, tiny bursts of texture in the syrupy pulp. It's a quiet kind of luxury, fresh fruit, right off the cactus, unbothered by ritual or ceremony. Historians agree that fruit wasn't an everyday indulgence for the Aztec priesthood. It was seasonal, unpredictable, governed by the whims of rain and sun. When the tunas ripened, you ate them. When they didn't, you waited. Patience, after all, was part of your training. But there's still some debate. Did priests have special gardens, tended just for them, stocked with rarities like white guavas and yellow prickly pears? Or were they just as dependent on market stalls and seasonal luck as everyone else? Some temple murals seem to hint at sacred orchards hidden within the complex, lush and forbidden to commoners. You'd like to believe in the secret gardens. It makes this moment feel more special. You move next to a guava tree, the branches heavy with small, greenish-yellow orbs. You pick one, rub it against your robe to clean off the dust, and bite in. The flesh is firm, gritty, and surprisingly tart, the seeds crunchier than you expect. Guavas are fickle. Too ripe and they're cloyingly sweet, not ripe enough and they pucker your mouth. Tonight's fruit sits perfectly in the middle, sharp enough to wake your senses, sweet enough to reward your patience. You take your time. Unlike maize and beans, fruits aren't built to store or stew. They're fleeting. You eat them fresh, under the stars, with juice running down your chin and the night air cool against your skin. There's a light joke among the younger acolytes. A priest's dessert is whatever he can reach before the bats do. You chuckle under your breath, remembering nights when you lost entire guava halls to flocks of chittering bats swooping low through the orchard. Another bite. Another burst of tart sweet flesh. The seeds grind under your teeth, stubborn little reminders that nothing good is entirely without effort. You drop the gnawed core into the underbrush and reach for another prickly pear, this one dark red, almost purple. The juice stains your fingers, bleeding into the tiny cuts left by the cactus spines. It stings a little. You smile. Pain and sweetness, twined together, an old lesson in edible form. The stars above you are brighter now, sharper. The constellations familiar, the Milky Way as silver rivers spilling across the heavens. You've chanted their names, honored their stories. And here, grounded by fruit and stone, you feel their weight pressing gently against the world. You finish your fruit, hands sticky, and wipe them on your robe without much ceremony. Around you, other priests do the same, moving slowly through the orchard like shadows gathering strength. The truth is, these fruits aren't just food. They're gifts, simple, seasonal, sacred. A prickly pear isn't just a snack, it's proof that patience is rewarded. But guava isn't just tart and sweet, it's the earth's quiet generosity. You gather a few more tunas, tucking them carefully into the folds of your robe for later. A small, personal treasure trove. As you turn to leave the orchard, the night hums louder, the faint, low beat of drums from the main temple platform, a reminder that the night's rituals are drawing near. Your stomach is satisfied now, in that hollow, quiet way that leaves room for prayer and endurance. But even as you head back toward the temple steps, a darker thought slips into your mind. A whisper from the old tales. There are other meals. Forbidden meals. Meals not of maize or beans or frogs, but of flesh. And while the official word is silence, the truth lingers. Historians still argue whether the rumors are real. Whether priests, secretive, silent, ever tasted the ultimate forbidden feast. And tonight, you're going to hear about it. You climb the temple steps slowly, feeling each stone under your sandals, the weight of your simple meal grounding you. The drums beat low and steady, a heartbeat pulsing through the night. The torches lining the temple walls gutter in the breeze, their flames smearing the darkness with flickering gold. You reach the upper platform and sit quietly among the other priests, your robe drawn tightly around you. No words are spoken. This is the time for silence, for waiting, and for remembering. Because as much as your diet tonight has been humble, maize, beans, squash, chilies, insects, fruit, there are other tales. Tales not officially told, not written down in the orderly codices, but whispered in the spaces between rituals. Tales of forbidden feasts. Historians still wrestle with the question, did Aztec priests participate in ritual cannibalism? The Spanish conquistadors, horrified and eager to justify conquest, wrote lurid accounts of human sacrifice followed by feasts of flesh. But were they exaggerating? Were they telling the truth? The archaeological record is murky, the evidence fragmentary. A cut mark here, a bone there. You sit, the night pressing close, and you remember the rumors. That after the sacrifice, when the blood was washed from the temple stones and the heart was lifted high to the gods, certain priests would partake in the body. Not for pleasure, not for hunger, but as a sacred act, a way to commune with the divine. Some say the flesh was cut into strips, roasted with maize and chilies, and shared among the highest orders. Some say it was stewed, tender and dark, flavored with amaranth and episode, the holy herbs. Some say it was eaten raw, a direct link between mortal and God. You've never seen it, never been invited. You are not high enough in the hierarchy, not yet. But you've heard the stories. You've seen the careful, practiced way some priests avert their eyes when the subject is raised. You've watched the older ones, the ones with the deepest robes and the heaviest feathered headdresses, share secret glances after the grand sacrifices. A fringe theory even suggests that the practice was limited to very specific festivals, Tlaquequetzalli, for example, the Feast of the Flaying of Men, when warriors were sacrificed and their skins worn by the living. Maybe, just maybe, the consumption of flesh was part of absorbing the courage, the essence, of the fallen. Or maybe it's all rumor, dark and smoky as the night. You shift on the stone platform, the chill seeping through the thin fabric of your robe. Below, the city stretches out, a pattern of light and shadow crisscrossed by canals that gleam like black glass under the stars. You can hear faint laughter, the splash of water, the low murmur of life continuing. Up here, though, it's just you and your thoughts. And the knowledge that you may never know the truth. The truth, after all, is slippery. Historians still argue whether these tales are the twisted inventions of horrified Spaniards or a hidden ritual kept alive by the highest priests. Some accounts claim the flesh was eaten not in secret but openly, as part of public ceremonies designed to honor the gods and remind the people of their place in the cosmos. Others claim it was all metaphor, symbolic consumption, not literal. The maize dough idols made from amaranth and honey, shaped like human figures and ceremonially eaten during festivals, were said to stand in for real flesh. The Spaniards may have misunderstood, seeing what they feared rather than what was real. You breathe in deeply, the smell of torches and night-blooming flowers thick in your nostrils. Your belly is full of simple food, sacred food. No flesh. No forbidden feasts. But you wonder what it would mean to take such a bite, to carry the essence of sacrifice into your own body, to become not just a servant of the gods but a vessel for their will. You close your eyes, and the night presses in. You don't know if the rumors are true. You probably never will. But you do know this, Here in Tenochtitlan, food is never just food. Every grain of maize, every bean, every grasshopper, every cup of cacao, it's all tied to the gods, to the cycles of the sun and the stars, to the blood that waters the earth. And whether or not the flesh was ever truly eaten, the idea lingers, sharp and unsettling as a thorn under the skin. You open your eyes. The night is still young, and there's more to taste, more to learn. Next comes a lesson not in what you eat, but what you own. Because in the Aztec world, cacao wasn't just a treat. It was your currency. And yes, you're about to find out how priests dined on their wealth. You rise from the temple platform, robes whispering against the stone, and make your way back toward the inner quarters. The drums have softened to a heartbeat rhythm now, barely felt more than heard. Around you, the torches gutter low, their flames no longer fierce but thoughtful, as if even the fire is settling into reflection. Inside, past the carved stone doorway, is the priest's council chamber, a plain room by noble standards, but not without its treasures. Against one wall sits a low table, and on it, stacked neatly in shallow bowls, is the true currency of your world, cacao beans. You sit cross-legged before them, eyeing the small, dull brown seeds. They don't look like much, withered, dusty, almost shriveled, but these are worth more than their weight in gold here. In fact, gold is decorative. Cacao is power. The Aztecs used cacao beans for everything from paying taxes to buying a slave to securing a hot meal from a market stall. A single cacao bean might fetch a tamale. A rabbit might cost 30. An entire robe of fine cotton? Hundreds. And here you are, a priest, staring down bowls of them, payment for rituals performed, alms given by the faithful, tribute funneled through the temple system. Historians agree on cacao's importance in Aztec commerce and ritual life, but there's still some friendly academic arm wrestling over just how much priests controlled. Some claim the temples were the city's cacao banks, their vaults filled not with gold bars but with sacks of beans. Others argue that cacao was tightly regulated by the nobility and merely passed through priestly hands like sand through fingers. You reach out and select a single bean, rolling it between your thumb and forefinger. Hard, faintly oily, it smells faintly of earth and bitter promise. Not really meant to be eaten raw, but that hasn't stopped you before. Tonight, though, cacao isn't just currency. It's dinner. Or at least, it funds dinner. You rise and move to the adjacent storeroom, where an older priest sits, tallying small parcels of food and supplies. You hand him a handful of cacao beans, your allowance for the week, and he slides a packet toward you wrapped in maguey fiber cloth. Inside, a collection of the temple's modest luxuries, a few extra tortillas, some squash seeds, a handful of dried fruit, and a small, precious cake of ground cacao mixed with chilies and maize flour. You sit back down, unwrap the bundle slowly, reverently. The cacao cake is heavy, dark, dense with flavor. You break off a small piece and chew. It's bitter, grainy, with a faint burn from the chilies. But it's rich, powerful, fuel for the rituals to come. There's a theory, popular among French historians, that priests intentionally priced food in cacao to encourage fasting. Eat too well, and you burn through your currency. Fast, and you saved. Discipline wasn't just spiritual, it was economic. You nibble on dry guava slices, their sweetness a sharp contrast to the bitter cacao, and think about the cycle of it all. Tribute comes in, cacao flows out. Prayers are said, rituals performed, lives balanced against the great wheel of seasons and sacrifice. You'd be lying if you said you didn't sometimes dream of spending it all on one glorious market binge. A roasted duck, a rabbit stew, tamales stuffed with turkey and pumpkin seeds. Maybe even a handful of bright feathers or a polished obsidian mirror. But that's not your life. You're a priest. Your luxury is a few extra tortillas, a smudge of cacao, the sweet shock of dried fruit. And even that comes with responsibility. You tuck the bundle back into its cloth, saving most of it for later. Tonight's rituals will run long, and you'll need strength at dawn when the stars fade and the real work begins again. Around you, the other priests are doing the same, trading cacao for simple meals, preparing for the long hours ahead. The room hums with quiet activity, a soft contrast to the roaring feasts of the nobles down in the city, where dancers whirl and drums pound and maize beer flows like rivers. But up here, among the stone and silence, every cacao bean is a prayer, every mouthful a meditation. You rise, tucking the bundle into the folds of your robe, and head for the stairs that lead back out into the night. The air is cooler now, the breeze tinged with the scent of lake water and crushed flowers. You breathe in deeply. Tomorrow is a feast day. Tonight is a fast. And you'll need to remember the balance, the rhythm, the rule of sacrifice that governs not just your food, but your very soul. Because not every day in a priest's life is about eating. Some days, it's about not eating at all. And yes, we're about to step into the strange, hungry world of feast days and fast days. The sky deepens ink, the stars brighter now, stitched like tiny beads into the fabric of night. You descend the temple steps, quiet, mindful, feeling the slight ache in your belly sharpen into something more insistent. Not hunger, yet, but the awareness of absence. Tonight, you won't eat again. Tomorrow is a feast day. And you, like all priests, must fast. The Aztec ritual calendar is a complex, relentless thing. It divides the year into cycles of festivals and fasts, feasts and abstinence, each carefully aligned with the movements of the heavens, the planting of maize, the rains that feed the lakes. It's not just about discipline, it's about harmony with forces larger than yourself. Historians are largely in agreement on this. Aztec priests followed strict dietary rules tied to the Tanapwali, the sacred 260-day calendar. Certain days demanded abstinence not just from food, but from pleasure of any kind. No music, no dance, no luxuries. Fasting wasn't punishment, it was participation in the cosmic order. But, naturally, there's debate about how stringent these fasts really were. Some scholars argue that high-ranking priests, cushioned by their status, had loopholes, meals of plain atoll or steamed amaranth cakes to keep from collapsing. Others insist the fasts were total, broken only by tiny sips of water and prayer. You believe in the stricter version. You have to. You move toward your quarters, a modest cell lined with reed mats and a low sleeping platform. No soft cushions, no decorations. Just the basics. You kneel by the small altar in the corner, lighting a stick of copal incense. The smoke curls upward, slow and fragrant, a lazy serpent winding toward the ceiling. Fasting, you've been taught, isn't about suffering. It's about clarity. Empty belly, clear mind. When you fast, you make space for the gods to fill you. Still, your body protests. You've eaten modestly tonight, maize, beans, a few mouthfuls of pond harvest, some fruit, a sip of bitter cacao, but now you must stretch those bites across the long, sleepless hours ahead. The fire of the chilies is a distant memory now. The warmth of the frog stew, the sweet sting of prickly pears, all fading, leaving only the hollow echo of fullness. You settle onto the mat, cross-legged, hands resting lightly on your knees. Breathing slows. The hunger sharpens, then flattens, a background hum to your thoughts. You remember the feasts, too. The days when food flows like water, when the gods are pleased, when sacrifice has been made and it's time to celebrate. Then, the market bursts with roasted turkey, fat tamales stuffed with squash blossoms and chilies, rich stews bubbling with maize and meat. Cacao flows freely, foamed to perfection, scented with vanilla or ground flowers. Fruits, nuts, even roasted insects laid out in heaps. You've seen the city glitter on feast days, 1,000 fires sending smoke spiraling into the sky, 1,000 drums shaking the earth. You've tasted the joy, brief and shining as a hummingbird's flight. But not tonight. Tonight, you fast. You think of the ancient stories, the gods who fasted before shaping the world, who tore open their own bodies to set the sun in motion, who gave up their strength so maize could sprout from the earth. Fasting is not deprivation. It's imitation. Participation. There's an old saying among priests, the gods feed us with one hand and fast us with the other. You smile at that, even as your stomach twists slightly. Fringe historians like to argue that fasting wasn't just ritual, it was political. A demonstration of priestly discipline, a tool to maintain authority over the common people. After all, a man who can starve and still chant, still dance, still bleed for the gods, that's a man who commands respect. Maybe there's truth in that. Maybe not. You're too busy breathing through the hollow ache to care. Outside, the city murmurs. Somewhere, a night bird calls. Water laps at the canal edges. Life continues. You shift slightly on your mat, adjusting to the steady burning your legs. Sleep will come later, in fitful snatches. First, there's chanting. Meditation. Preparing your mind for the ceremonies at dawn. Fasting is a kind of feast, too. You feast on silence, on discipline, on emptiness. You close your eyes. The hunger is there. It sharpens you. It humbles you. You are ready. Because tomorrow, when the sun rises and the city gathers to honor the gods, your empty stomach will be a full offering. But tonight, as you sit quietly in the darkness, you can't help but wonder if fasting is sacred. What about those other missing foods? Why, for example, is fish, so abundant in the lakes, so strangely absent from your table? You'll find out soon enough. The stars will overhead as the night drags on, and with your stomach hollow and mind sharp, the thoughts come wandering, questioning, needling. Why, in a city floating on water, with lakes teeming with life, is there so little fish on your plate? It's a question that puzzles not just you, kneeling here in the pre-dawn stillness, but modern historians too. Fish are everywhere, silver flashes in the canals, fat frogs croaking in the reeds, shrimp darting through the shallows. And yet, when you look back on the day's meager meals, when you tally up the common feasts and priestly fasts, fish is strangely, conspicuously scarce. Some scholars suggest it's about purity. Fish, after all, are slippery, liminal creatures, dwelling between worlds, neither land nor sky. In a culture where symbolism is layered into everything, maybe fish were too ambiguous, too slippery for priestly consumption. Others think it was purely practical. Fish spoil quickly, and without ice or refrigeration, a catch has to move fast from lake to market to table. Maybe the logistical headache was just too much for temple life, where schedules are dictated by the sun and the gods, not by the whims of fishermen. And then there's the fringe theory, the one you hear whispered during long, sleepless nights like this. Some believe that fish were considered offerings for Tlaloc, the rain god, and therefore too sacred to eat casually. They could be caught, they could be sacrificed, but consuming them for sustenance was taboo for the priesthood. Reserved for the gods, not for mortal bellies. You shift on your mat, the reeds creaking under your weight. Outside, the first hints of dawn begin to stain the horizon, a faint pink bruising the edge of the sky. You've eaten frog legs, sure. Tiny, oily, but respectable. But fish? You can count on one hand the number of times you've tasted it, and each time was a rare exception, festivals tied to Tlaloc, special rituals when the offerings overflowed and a few slippery morsels found their way to your plate. Mostly, fish end up in the market. Commoners buy them fresh, tiny charelish, tilapia from the shallows, catfish heavy and lazy from deeper waters. Roasted over hot stones, ground into stews, dried and salted when the catch was good. But for you, for your fellow priests, the fast days stretch on with beans, maize, squash, chilies, plenty of plants, plenty of insects. Hardly ever fish. You remember once, as a novice, sneaking a bite of roasted shrimp during a festival. The fat little body popped between your teeth, salty and rich. Your master caught you, of course, his face stern but not angry. Some foods, he said, belong to the gods. You didn't forget. Historians still argue whether that was a widespread rule or a local custom. Some evidence suggests that priests in coastal regions, far from the capital, ate more fish and shellfish as part of their regular diet. Others point to temple murals and codices that depict fish not on plates, but in nets and baskets, carried as tribute to the gods. You prefer the mystery. It fits the rhythm of priestly life. Some things are meant for mortals, others are reserved for higher powers. To blur that line is to invite imbalance. The hunger gnaws at you now, sharper as the dawn stretches thin fingers over the city. You breathe slowly, deeply, grounding yourself against the emptiness. No fish. No meat. Just the steady, humble staples. But that's not to say your diet lacks cosmic grandeur. Because here in Tenochtitlan, even your meal times, what little you eat, and when you eat it, are synced not to your own whims, but to the stars. You smile faintly, feeling the slow tick of the universe beyond your fasting belly. Because yes, soon you'll understand how you eat by the stars themselves. The sky is slowly bleeding from black to gray as the first rays of sunlight creep toward the temple steps. You rise from your mat, knees stiff from hours of stillness, and stretch your arms overhead. A low rumble of hunger coils in your belly, but you push it aside. Your next meal isn't dictated by appetite. It never is. As a priest, even your eating is synced with something greater, the stars. You make your way to the eastern courtyard where the other priests are gathering, faces shadowed and solemn in the growing light. Above you, Venus, the morning star, glitters fiercely against the fading night, its presence sharp and commanding. In the Aztec world, Venus isn't just another twinkle in the sky. It's Tlahuizcalpanacutli, the god of dawn, the spear thrower, the celestial herald. Venus rising or setting marks the beginning of sacred cycles, guiding war, sacrifice, and, yes, even the timing of when you're allowed to eat. Historians agree, the Aztecs meticulously tracked Venus's movements, aligning key rituals, and by extension, daily rhythms, to its bright appearances and disappearances. But scholars still wrestle with the details. How strictly did this celestial clock control priestly life? Was every meal timed to the stars, or just the ones during major festivals? You believe in the stricter interpretation. You have to. Tonight, this dawn, is special. The heliacal rising of Venus, a sign that certain fasts can be broken, certain ceremonies completed, certain meals finally begun. You can feel it in the air, a crackling tension like the pause before a storm. The French historians, the ones who like their theories extra crunchy, suggest that priests timed not just meals but bites, that each swallow, each morsel, was synchronized to astrological cycles. A bite at Venus rise, a sip at Venus set. You chuckle under your breath. Even you aren't that devoted. Still, you wait. You wait until the senior priest raises a hand, until the first full rim of the sun tips over the distant mountains, golden and patient. Only then does he lower his hand and give a single, almost imperceptible nod. The fast is over. But this is no feast. You're handed a small, flat cake, simple maize flour mixed with water and roasted on a stone, no salt, no spice. It's warm against your palms, steam curling up in the cool morning air. You take a bite, careful not to rush. The cake is dry, a little chewy, but it tastes like relief, like sunrise, like the quiet joy of discipline honored. You chew slowly, feeling the weight of ritual settle on your shoulders. This isn't just breakfast. It's the culmination of cosmic alignment, a silent pact between earth and sky, human and God. Around you, other priests do the same. No chatter, no smiles. Just chewing, swallowing, waiting. In the distance, the city stirs. Canoes push off into the canals. Vendors arrange their wares. Smoke from cooking fires coils lazily upward. But here, at the temple's heart, time moves differently, measured not by hours, but by stars. The last bit of the cake dissolves on your tongue, and you wash it down with a sip of plain water, cupped in a small clay vessel. No cacao today. No sweet fruits. Just sustenance, as the gods intended. You wipe your hands on the hem of your robe, the fabric rough against your skin. The hunger is muted now, replaced by a quiet, buzzing energy. A kind of fullness that has nothing to do with food. The sun climbs higher, and Venus fades, its bright defiance swallowed by daylight. You stand, stretching again, ready for the next round of rituals, chants, prayers. But even as you settle into the morning's rhythm, you can't help but reflect on the deeper truth of this practice. Food isn't just about survival. It's a performance. A sacred theater, a cosmic dance. Because here in the temple, every bite, every fast, every feast is a part of the grand drama. And you, humble priests, are an actor on a stage set by the gods themselves. The day swells around you, the sun hot and bright now, shadows shrinking under its steady glare. You move back into the cool shadow of the temple, weaving past stone pillars etched with glyphs of maize and serpents, gods and stars. There's work to be done, but first, a final meditation on what you've just lived through. Because here, in this world shaped by gods and bound by stars, food isn't merely sustenance, it's performance. You don't just eat. You perform eating. Every morsel is a line in a play, every sip a carefully rehearsed gesture in an ancient script. It's a ritual as old as the stones under your feet, older maybe, whispered down from gods who first broke themselves apart to feed humanity with their very bones. The market women wrapping tamales in maize leaves? Performers. The farmers kneeling by their chinampas to plant amaranth seeds? Performers. The priests, like you, pacing their fasts to Venus, nibbling cactus fruit under moonlight, chanting as they crunch down on toasted grasshoppers? Definitely performers. Historians nod and agree, Aztec life was theater. Life itself was spectacle. But they still squabble over the details. Was this performance deliberate, conscious, or was it simply the air they breathed, the water they drank? Was it a show for the gods, for each other, for themselves? You lean against a pillar, feeling its cool surface bleed through your robe, and smile faintly. You know the answer. It was all three. Take the simplest meal, beans and maize. Eat it sitting cross-legged before a flickering torch, sharing it with your brother priests in perfect silence. The act isn't just survival, it's a small reenactment of the cosmic order. Maize and beans, together, balanced, the way the gods designed it when they stitched this world from the bones of the dead. Even the act of not eating, fasting for days at a time, becomes a kind of negative performance, a silence in the symphony, a pause that amplifies the music when it returns. The French theorists like to imagine that even the smallest gestures were loaded with meaning, that the way you folded your tortilla, the way you held your cacao cup, even the hand you used to eat, left or right, was encoded with signals to the divine. And maybe they're right. Maybe every bite, every fast, every indulgence was a prayer in motion, a silent hymn. You push off the pillar and make your way toward the temple kitchens again. Not to eat, not yet, but to watch. Inside, acolytes move like dancers, silent, precise. Grinding maize on the metate, the rhythmic scrape of stone on stone. Roasting squash seeds, the hiss and pop and sudden, rich scent. Scooping amaranth paste into tiny molds shaped like gods and warriors. The kitchen is a stage. The cooks are the chorus. Every action a line in an endless, unwritten script. And you? You're an actor too. Your role might be somber, your lines quiet, but you're part of the drama nonetheless. There's a practical side to this theater, of course. Ritualized eating and fasting maintain order, reinforce the hierarchy. When you see a priest endure hunger without complaint, when you watch him sip bitter cacao with grace, you're reminded of his connection to the divine, his sacrifice, his authority. But beneath that, deeper than the politics and the pageantry, there's something purer. A meal, humble or grand, is a conversation. Between human and God, between body and soul, between earth and sky. You close your eyes for a moment, breathing in the kitchen's mingled scents, smoke, maize, chili, something sweet you can't quite name. You imagine the gods above, watching, amused, perhaps a little jealous, as mortals perform their ancient, edible theater. The day rolls on, the sun climbing higher, the heat pressing against the stones. You know you'll eat again later, modestly, deliberately, performing the sacred dance of sustenance one more time. And then, the next meal. And the next. Each one a step, a note, a whispered line. But first, a word of caution. Because in this theater, not every dish is safe. Some treats, some delicacies, are double-edged. They nourish, and they poison. And yes, you're about to taste the dark, thrilling world of toxic treats. The sun hangs high now, heavy and unblinking, as you make your way beyond the temple kitchens, toward the herb gardens tucked into the rear courtyards. Here, in orderly rows, grow the plants that feed not just the body but the spirit, and sometimes, test the limits of both. You move slowly, hands tucked into the wide sleeves of your robe. This isn't a place to rush. You step carefully around rows of amaranth, epazote, and chaya, but what catches your eye are the less celebrated plants, the ones with jagged leaves, bruised purple berries, and a kind of muted menace to their growth. You kneel beside a cluster of small bushes, laden with bright red fruits. Talochi. Sacred and feared. The plant's name hums in the back of your mind, heavy with caution. You wouldn't eat it casually. You wouldn't eat it at all unless you had a death wish, or a vision to seek. Historians agree that the Aztecs understood the fine line between food and poison, perhaps better than we do now. Their kitchens and gardens were stocked not just with nourishing plants, but with ones that could kill, stupefy, or induce visions so profound they felt like stepping into the god's own dreams. But there's debate, of course. Did priests truly ingest these plants? Or were they reserved for special ceremonies, ritual deaths, sacred journeys beyond the flesh? Some argue that small doses were common among high priests seeking divine insight. Others insist that these were strictly for the chosen few, the most daring. You pluck a single talochi flower, carefully, respectfully, and roll it between your fingers. It smells faintly sweet, a deceitful softness that masks its potency. It's not the only danger lurking in the Aztec diet. Take chaya, a leafy green that looks like harmless spinach. Raw, it's toxic, loaded with cyanogenic compounds that can cripple or kill. Cooked properly, it's a superfood, rich in protein, iron, and calcium. Get it wrong, and you pay the price. Or consider tepezin, whose bark and leaves were used to flavor certain ritual drinks. Too much, and you'd collapse into a feverish stupor. Just enough, and you might feel a blessed lightness, a connection to the floating world beyond the sun. You rise and move along the garden's edge where another familiar plant grows, datura. Thick, waxy leaves. Trumpet-shaped flowers hanging limp like sleeping bats. Datura is no casual ingredient. Ingest it, and you don't just dream, you fall into a void so deep and disorienting that few ever return whole. Some French historians suggest that small doses of datura were mixed into ritual cacao drinks for certain elite priests, thinning the barrier between the mundane and the sacred. Was it true? Did you sip visions with your bitter cacao? Hard to say. No one talks openly about it. You smile faintly. In a world so tightly woven with gods and omens, it makes sense that the boundary between nourishment and danger would be just as thin. Every bite, every sip, a decision, life or death, clarity or madness. You move on, past rows of safer herbs now, avocado leaves, good for seasoning and medicine, chili bushes, punishment and pleasure wrapped in fire, cilantro, mint, friendly faces in a garden full of sharp-toothed smiles. There's an old joke among acolytes, eat the wrong leaf, and you'll meet the gods faster than you planned. It's only half a joke. You stop by a small, neat patch of wasentl, a cousin of quinoa. It looks gentle, unassuming, and you know it's both food and warning. Eaten tender, it nourishes. Left too long on the stalk, the seeds harden and become indigestible, almost toxic. You pluck a few leaves, chew thoughtfully. Nutty, green, almost peppery. Safe, today, at least. The sun climbs higher, and you shade your eyes. Beyond the garden walls, you can hear the clatter of market stalls, the calls of merchants hawking their wares, safe food for the masses. But in the temple, where life is sharper, riskier, food carries heavier meaning. You turn back toward the kitchens, mind buzzing softly with the knowledge that what you put in your mouth is never just about flavor. It's about balance. It's about respect. It's about knowing that sometimes, the most sacred things are the most dangerous. The priests who master these toxic treats aren't just cooks. They're alchemists, tightrope walkers on the thinnest edge of life. And as you walk, stomach still hollow, mind still clear, you realize something else. It's not just plants that give the priesthood its edge. It's the seeds. The tiny, unassuming grains packed with more power than an entire feast. Because yes, next, you'll chew your way into the world of Aztec superfoods, chia and amaranth, the tiny giants of the priestly table. You stride back into the kitchens, the herb garden's dangers fading behind you. The air is warmer now, filled with the earthy perfume of roasted maize and simmering beans, but you catch another scent too, nutty, toasted, almost grassy. You follow it to a small, cracked stone bowl sitting low on a reed mat. Inside is a heap of tiny seeds, round and faintly glossy. You recognize them immediately, chia. In the Aztec world, chia isn't just food. It's fuel. It's power compressed into something barely larger than a grain of sand. You scoop a few seeds into your palm. They feel alive somehow, vibrating faintly with the weight of their own quiet importance. No feast day, no fast day, no grueling ceremony is complete without them. Historians agree that chia was a staple of the Aztec diet, especially for warriors and priests, those whose bodies were demanded to do more, endure more. Chia seeds soaked in water, pinole, created a gel-like drink that could sustain a person for a day or more. Energy in a cup. The ancient world's answer to a modern energy bar. Still, debates linger. Some scholars insist chia was more ritual than regular food, an offering to the gods, a sacred plant used sparingly. Others argue it was a daily necessity, as common as maize, woven seamlessly into meals and ceremonies alike. You lean down, scooping a few more seeds into a clay cup, and pour water over them. Slowly, they swell, the liquid thickening into a slick, viscous slurry. You stir it with your finger, watching the seeds float and bob like tiny moons in a dark sky. The first sip is strange, gelatinous, slippery, but not unpleasant. It tastes of earth and life, a grounding reminder of where your strength truly comes from. But chia isn't alone in this small seed pantheon. Across the mat sits another bowl, this one filled with the familiar, pale grains of amaranth, Watley, the tiny giant. Where chia fuels the body, amaranth fuels both body and soul. You reach into the bowl, scooping up a handful. The grains are lighter, more delicate, but no less potent. Cooked, they puff into tender, nutty morsels, packed with protein, iron, and calcium. Pounded into flour, They form the basis of ceremonial cakes, like the downy idols crafted and eaten during sacred festivals, a practice that so unnerved Spanish priests they banned amaranth cultivation for centuries. French historians love to argue about that. Was the ban about religion? Politics? A practical fear of a crop too powerful to control? You pop a few grains into your mouth, chewing slowly. They crackle faintly between your teeth, releasing a gentle, buttery flavor. The Aztecs considered amaranth divine. Not just food, but sustenance elevated to sacrament. It was offered to the gods in great, molded effigies. It was given to the sick to restore strength. It was reserved for the highest of the high, those who needed to survive not just battles and fasts but the weight of spiritual warfare. And here you are, humbly chewing it, feeling a little like a temple in miniature, body and spirit fed by the same tiny seeds. You take another sip of chia slurry, feeling its weight settle low and solid in your stomach. Between the chia and amaranth, you could endure almost anything: days of fasting, sleepless nights, endless ceremonies. Some of the younger priests joke that these superfoods are a kind of secret weapon. One handful of seeds, they laugh, and you can outlast a rainstorm, a battle, and a lecture from the high priest, all in one day. You chuckle softly at the memory, wiping your hands on your robe. But there's a serious edge to it, too. These tiny, humble seeds aren't just about strength. They're about survival. In a world where life is brief and the gods demand much, where the sun itself is kept alive by human hearts, you need every advantage you can get. And so you eat your chia and your amaranth. You sip your thick, viscous drink. You chew your cracked, nutty grains. Quiet, steady fuel for a life lived on the edge of devotion and death. As you finish the last of your cup, the kitchen hums around you, the sounds of preparation rising, mortar grinding maize, firewood crackling, clay pots clanking. Another day's feast is being readied. But not for you. You wipe your mouth and stand slowly, feeling the seeds settle into your gut like small anchors. There's more to learn, more to taste. You're not just a priest, you're a student of this sacred kitchen. And next, it's time to step behind the curtain. Because what happens in the Kalmakak, the priestly school, isn't just prayers and punishments. It's where you learn to cook, to survive, to sanctify every grain and seed and meal. And yes, you're about to learn the kitchen secrets of the Kalmakak. The kitchen hum fades behind you as you step toward the more shadowed halls of the temple complex, where the Kalmakak waits. This is where you learn to be who you are, not just a priest, but a vessel, a conduit, a living offering. And, believe it or not, a cook. You duck under the low stone lintel and enter the training halls, bare save for a few reed mats, clay bowls stacked neatly against the walls, and the faint scent of long cold incense. The Kalmakak isn't grand like the palace schools where nobles send their sons. It's severe, stripped down to essentials, just like your diet. But hidden behind these plain walls are kitchen secrets known only to the priesthood. Historians, for all their digging, still argue how much culinary training priests actually received. Some insist the Kalmakak was purely for chanting, math, and ritual recitation. Others whisper that priests were schooled in practical arts too, gardening, cooking, healing, because when you live a life of fasting and sacrifice, you need to know how to sustain yourself on almost nothing. You move toward the back where the real lessons happened, memories stirring. You can still see yourself, younger, kneeling on a woven mat, a matete stone in front of you, grinding maize into paste for hours until your arms ached and your mind wandered into a trance. You learn patience first, humility second, and endurance always. Because grinding maize isn't just cooking, it's prayer. You were taught how to knead tamale dough until it floated in water, light as a cloud. How to toast amaranth without burning the tiny grains, a process so delicate it feels like chasing smoke. How to soak maize in slaked lime to unlock its nutrients, a process called nixtamalization, a discovery so old that even your elders speak of it with reverence, as though it were a gift straight from the gods. One slip, too much lime, too little soaking, and the maize would be useless. Toxic even. The gods are exacting. So is the maize. Your teachers also taught you how to recognize safe greens from deadly ones, how to dry fish so it wouldn't rot before sunrise, how to make a meal stretch not just a day but a season. There's a saying passed quietly among Kalmakak novices: learn to cook or learn to starve. It sounds harsh, but it's truth. In a world where fasts stretch on for days, where feasts come like sudden storms and vanish just as fast, survival isn't about abundance. It's about knowledge. Fringe scholars love to speculate that this culinary training gave priests an edge in society, that behind their chanting and sacrifices, priests were also the nutritional backbone of the empire, the guardians of the old foodways. It's a nice thought. Practical too. You smile, remembering your first successful tamale. Not the ones stuffed with rabbit or turkey or duck, the simple ones, filled with beans and squash, wrapped in maize leaves and steamed over a fire of maguey wood. Humble. Perfect. You remember the way your master tasted it, nodding once, solemn as a priest tasting sacrament. Good, he said. Now make 1,000 more. Because in the Kalmakak, nothing is ever about one. One prayer isn't enough. One tamale isn't enough. One fast isn't enough. You learn repetition, devotion, obedience, through food as much as through words. You run your hand lightly over a matate stone, the surface worn smooth by centuries of maize and sweat and whispered prayers. It's heavier than it looks, this tradition. Heavier than any feast. And through it all, a quiet truth settles over you. The kitchen is a temple too. The fire, an altar. The maize dough, an offering. Every meal a mass. The kitchen secrets of the Kalmakak aren't recipes. They're rituals. How to live humbly. How to eat modestly. How to honor the gods with every bite, every fast, every hunger pain. You step back into the corridor, the echo of your sandals lost in the thick air. Beyond the training halls, a small orchard waits. Guavas, nopal, amaranth growing wild. And somewhere in the shadow of the orchard, another lesson lingers, one you never fully understood, one that historians can't quite agree on either. The mystery of the avocado. Everyday fare or priestly luxury? Tonight, you're going to find out. You walk slowly now, your steps measured, as you leave the Kalmakak stone corridors behind and make your way into the small orchard nestled against the temple's rear wall. The air shifts, warmer, softer, carrying the faint scent of ripe fruit and crushed leaves. And there, beneath the gnarled branches, you see them, avocado trees, their heavy green fruits drooping like pendulums from tired limbs. You pause, arms crossed loosely, and let the scene settle in. Avocados, awakadl in your nahuatl tongue, smooth-skinned, dense, rich with a buttery softness unmatched by any other fruit you know. You reach up, pluck one gently, and roll it in your palm. Cool. Heavy. Promising. Now, here's the thing, in your world, not every food is created equal. Some foods are fuel, some are offerings, and some are luxuries. And avocados? They've always been perched on the knife edge between sacred indulgence and everyday fare. Historians still argue about it. Some claim avocados were common, everyday fruit, eaten by farmers and priests alike, sliced onto maize tortillas or mashed with chilies into a thick, earthy paste. Others insist they were rarer, treasured, reserved for feast days and high rituals, parceled out like jewels to those who had earned them. You're not entirely sure who's right. What you know is this: you didn't eat avocados often as a novice. They weren't banned like meat during fasts, nor strictly forbidden, but they were noticed. A priest caught eating too many might be accused of indulgence, of leaning too close to gluttony. And here's a little secret they don't teach you in the Kalmakak. Awakadl also means testicle in Nahuatl, a sly reference to the fruit's shape and rumored potency. It's said that eating too many can stoke passions you're supposed to be keeping under very strict wraps. You smirk slightly at the thought, the avocado's still cool against your palm. Maybe that's why they were quietly frowned upon, too rich, too indulgent, too potent. Fringe scholars, ever eager for a scandal, suggest that avocados were banned in certain temples altogether. Too much risk. Too much temptation. A well-fed priest might forget his fasts, his vows, his place in the cosmic order. After all, when the gods demand sacrifice, they're not asking for satisfaction. They're asking for discipline. You peel the skin back carefully, the soft green flesh yielding under your fingers. No knife needed, your thumb slides through it easily, and you scoop a bite straight from the fruit. It's rich, creamy, subtly sweet, with a faint grassy undertone that lingers on your tongue. Heavier than maize, lighter than beans, more decadent than squash or amaranth. You chew slowly, deliberately, feeling the weight of the bite settle in your belly like a secret. You think about the others, novices sneaking slices when the high priests weren't looking, old masters savoring a few hidden bites during festival preparations. No ceremony, no prayers, just quiet, guilty indulgence. And you think about the murals, Nobles reclining with bowls of guacamole, warriors fed avocados before battle to bolster their strength, their vitality. Food for the body. Food for the fire inside. You finish the flesh, tossing the pit into the underbrush where it lands with a soft thud. Around you, the orchard hums with life, the chirp of insects, the rustle of birds nesting in the trees. The sun, sliding slowly toward its descent, casts the leaves in gold. You wipe your hands on your robe and smile faintly. Avocados might be simple fruit to some, forbidden fruit to others. To you, they're a reminder, even in a life of fasting and prayer, the earth's bounty calls, tempts, teaches. You walk slowly back toward the temple, the orchard fading behind you. Your belly is not quite full, but content. Your mind is sharp, your spirit settled. There's one more ritual to come before the day fades completely. One final bite. Not a feast. Not a fast. Just a quiet meal. A last taste before dawn. You smile. Because yes, you're about to experience the final, sacred hush of the last bite before the day begins. The light is dying fast now, draining from the sky in long, sleepy streaks of gold and purple. You drift back toward the temple's stone steps, the walls casting deep shadows across the courtyard. The drums have gone silent. The fires are low. Only the soft shuffle of sandals and the whisper of robes brushing stone mark the presence of your fellow priests. You settle onto a worn bench, the stone cool against your legs even through the heavy fabric of your robe. From the far end of the courtyard, a young acolyte approaches, carrying a small clay bowl wrapped carefully in a cloth. He kneels, offering it to you with both hands, head bowed in respect. You accept it quietly, pulling back the cloth. Inside, a simple tortilla, folded around a modest filling of beans, a hint of amaranth, and a dusting of ground squash seeds. No meat, no chilies tonight. No avocado, no cacao. Just the essentials. This is your last bite before dawn, the closing of the day's slow, sacred performance. You take the tortilla in your hands. It's still warm, barely, the heat of the kitchen fire clinging to it like a memory. You lift it to your mouth and bite. It's soft, earthy, humble. The beans are rich, the amaranth adding a faint pop, the squash seeds a whisper of nutty flavor. Nothing extravagant. Nothing indulgent. Just enough. Enough to remind you that you're human, but sacred. Enough to sustain you through the long prayers of the coming dawn. Enough to keep you tethered to the earth, even as your spirit strains upward toward the gods. Historians might argue endlessly over the exact details of what Aztec priests ate, the when, the what, the why, but they miss the quiet truth that you feel now, here, in the final stillness of the night. Eating was never just about the body. It was about harmony. With the earth, with the sky, with yourself. You chew slowly, feeling each grain of amaranth crackle between your teeth, each breath drawing the cool night air deep into your lungs. Around you, other priests do the same, their faces calm, reflective. No chatter. No ceremony. Just the simple, shared act of nourishment. You finish the last bite, brushing stray crumbs from your lap. The acolyte approaches again, kneeling to take the empty bowl. You hand it to him with a nod, no words exchanged. Words aren't necessary. You lean back against the stone wall, feeling its solidity, its ancient patience. Above you, the stars will in silence, the Milky Way a faint ribbon stretching across the heavens. Venus is gone now, swallowed by the encroaching dawn. The air is still, heavy with the scent of copal and distant water. You close your eyes and breathe. This is the life you have chosen. Or perhaps, the life that has chosen you. A life of fasting and feasting, of silence and song, of simple meals and sacred performances. A life measured not in riches or power, but in the steady, humble rhythm of sacrifice and service. A life where even a single tortilla can be a prayer. You smile, a small, private smile, and let the night settle fully around you. Tomorrow will come, with all its rituals and demands. But for now, you rest. Full enough. Empty enough. Ready. The world softens around you, as if even the stars are sighing into sleep. The torches burn low now, tiny islands of light in the vast, dark sea of the temple. The last of the fires have been banked to embers, and the gentle, smoky perfume of the evening lingers in the still air. You stretch your legs out slowly, feeling the coolness of the stone seep into your bones. The hum of the city below fades, replaced by the quiet chirp of crickets and the distant splash of water against canal banks. Even the wind seems to move more slowly now, as if careful not to disturb the peace you've woven around yourself. Your hands rest easily on your lap, empty now, but not wanting. The last meal, simple and sacred, sits comfortably in your belly, its quiet energy pulsing in slow, steady rhythms. There's no hurry here. No need. No wanting. Just the easy, ancient weight of satisfaction that feels more spirit than stomach. You tilt your head back and watch the stars shimmer lazily across the velvet sky. No chants now, no rituals, just the slow, silent dance of the cosmos, playing out its endless story overhead. The night hums in tune with your breath, slow and deep, as if the world is breathing with you, for you. The gods are quiet too, watching from their places beyond the stars, content for now. You are full, but not heavy, empty, but not hollow. And as your eyes drift closed, and the temple stones cradle you in their ancient, patient embrace, you carry with you the simple, profound truth of tonight. You are enough. The night is enough. The world, for this small, perfect moment, is enough. Sweet dreams.